Before we dive into this story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. We'd love to know. Now, let's begin. The rain had been falling since noon. By 7 o'clock, the streets of Mill Haven, Ohio were mostly empty. Cars splashed through puddles without slowing down. Porch lights flickered on, one by one, as families settled in for the night. Everyone was going somewhere warm. Everyone except two little girls standing near the entrance of Crawford's corner store. They weren't playing. They weren't talking. They were just there. The older one stood straight, shoulders back, her thin coat darkened by the rain. She held her little sister close with both arms, the way you hold something you're afraid to lose. The smaller girl's head kept drooping forward, fighting sleep the way only a tired 3-year-old can. And every time it happened, her big sister reached up and gently smoothed her hair back into place. Nobody had taught her to do that. She just knew. The security guard at the door glanced at them twice, then he looked away. Customers walked in and out. Some looked. No one stopped, and the minutes kept passing. Sergeant Daniel Harris was heading back to the station after a quiet patrol when his headlights caught them. He almost didn't stop. It had been a long shift. The rain was picking up. He was tired in the way that lives in your bones, but something made him slow down. He pulled over, stepped out into the rain, and walked toward them carefully, the way you approach something fragile. The older girl watched him the whole time. No panic, no tears, just two serious brown eyes, measuring him. He crouched down to her level. "Hey there," he said softly. "Have you been waiting long?" She didn't answer right away. She looked down at her little sister, whose eyes were finally closing, head resting heavy against her shoulder. Then she looked back at Daniel. "Is Lily going to sleep inside tonight?" That was all she said. Not "Where is my mom?" Not "Can you help us?" Not "I'm scared." Just that one question. About her sister, about a roof, about one warm night. Daniel felt something shift inside his chest, quiet and deep, like a door opening in a house he thought had been closed for years. He took off his jacket and wrapped it gently around both girls. "Yes," he said. "She is." He didn't know yet what that promise would cost him. He didn't know that those two little girls were about to change everything. His empty house, his quiet routines, and the walls he had spent 11 years building around himself. He only knew one thing in that moment. He was not going to walk away. What happened to bring these two little girls to that doorstep on a rainy night? And where was the person who was supposed to come back for them? The answers will surprise you, because this is not a story about a bad person. It's a story about a good person who broke. Chapter 2 is coming, and you won't want to miss it. There are people who fail loudly. You see them coming. You hear the crash. You know who to blame. And then there are people who fail quietly, slowly, invisibly, like a candle burning down in a room where nobody is watching. By the time anyone notices, there's nothing left but a little smoke and a cold room. Carla Dennings was that kind of person. She was 31 years old. Brown hair she never had time to fix properly. Hands that were always doing something. Washing dishes, folding laundry, signing permission slips, counting change at the checkout line. She worked the morning shift at a diner and the evening shift at a laundromat, 6 days a week, because that was what it took to keep the lights on and food in the refrigerator. She never complained, not because life was easy, because she didn't think complaining would help. Emma and Lily were everything to her. Anyone who saw them together could tell. Saturday mornings, Carla would make hot chocolate and let Emma pick the cartoons. She'd hold Lily on her lap and rock her even though Lily was probably already too big to be rocked. Those mornings were the best part of her week. But 18 months before that rainy night at Crawford's, Carla hurt her back lifting boxes at the laundromat. The doctor called it a herniated disc. The pain was real, sharp and relentless, the kind that makes it hard to think straight. She had no proper health insurance. The bills arrived in envelopes she started leaving unopened on the kitchen counter. The doctor prescribed pain medication. Legal, approved, signed. At first it just helped her get through the shift. Then it helped her get through the morning, then through the night. Then she needed more to feel the same relief she used to feel with less. She knew something was wrong. She was not a foolish woman. But she was a terrified one, because the one thought that paralyzed her completely was this: if I ask for help, someone might take my girls. So she said nothing. She kept working. She kept smiling at Emma's school events. She kept showing up, until the day she couldn't. That evening before the rain started, Carla sat in her car outside Crawford's corner store for 23 minutes. She had driven the girls there, telling them she needed to pick something up. But she couldn't make herself go inside. She couldn't make herself do much of anything. Her hands gripped the steering wheel. Her vision kept blurring. She looked in the rearview mirror and saw Emma helping Lily out of the back seat, taking her hand, walking her to the covered entrance to wait. Carla watched them. And something in her, something exhausted and ashamed and completely overwhelmed, made a terrible decision. Not out of cruelty. Not because she didn't love them. She drove away telling herself she just needed 20 minutes, that she'd be back. She believed it when she thought it. But 20 minutes became an hour, and an hour became the rest of the night. And by the time anyone thought to look for Carla Dennings, her car was found parked outside a motel 40 miles away, empty. Carla was gone, and 2 little girls were still waiting by the door. Nobody in Millhaven knew the full story yet. Not Beverly, not the courts, and certainly not Sergeant Daniel Harris, who was just beginning to understand what he had walked into. Daniel Harris had lived alone for 11 years, not the kind of alone that comes from being shy or difficult or strange, the kind that creeps in slowly when you spend too many years putting everything else first: the job, the badge, the next call, the next shift. And then one day you look up and the house is quiet in a way that doesn't feel peaceful anymore. It just feels empty. He was 52 years old, broad shoulders that had started to round slightly with age, gray at his temples, laugh lines around his eyes that didn't get much use lately. He made his coffee the same way every morning, ate dinner at the same time every night, and went to bed with the television on because silence had a way of getting too loud when you were by yourself. His ex-wife, Patrice, had remarried years ago. They were civil when they had to be. His daughter, Mara, was 31 and lived 2 towns over. She called on birthdays, sometimes holidays. The distance between them wasn't measured in miles. It was measured in all the school plays he had missed, all the dinners that went cold waiting for him, all the time she needed her father and got a voicemail instead. He knew it. He had never found the right words to fix it. So the house stayed quiet. He had 3 bedrooms. One he slept in, one he used as storage, one he kept closed. He never talked about the closed room. When Daniel brought Emma and Lily to his home that first night, just temporarily, he told himself, just until Beverly and the department sorted things out, he stood in the hallway and looked at the space with new eyes. Suddenly the quiet felt different, not peaceful, not lonely either. Just waiting. Emma walked in holding Lily's hand and looked around carefully, the way children do when they're trying to decide if a place is safe. She didn't touch anything, didn't ask for anything. She found the couch, sat down, settled Lily against her side, and waited. Daniel stood there not knowing what to do with his own hands. He asked if they were hungry. Emma nodded once. He opened the refrigerator and stared at it for a long moment. Leftover takeout, a block of cheese, half a carton of orange juice. Not exactly a children's menu. He made scrambled eggs. He burnt the first batch. Started over. Said nothing about it. Emma ate quietly. Lily fell asleep before she finished half her plate. Later that night, after both girls were in bed, Emma in the guest room, Lily tucked beside her, Daniel sat at the kitchen table with a cold cup of coffee and stared at the wall. What was he doing? He was a 52-year-old divorced man with a complicated relationship with his only daughter, a job that had taken more than it had given, and not a single book in the house aimed at anyone under the age of 40. He pulled out his phone, typed slowly, how to take care of a child temporarily. Then he put the phone down, picked it up again, drove 15 minutes to the only pharmacy still open and stood in front of a shelf of children's books and basic supplies for 10 full minutes, picking things up and putting them back, until a teenage employee asked if he needed help, and he said, more honestly than he intended, I have no idea what I'm doing. He came home with a beginner's cookbook for kids, a small nightlight shaped like a star, and a box of animal crackers. He set the nightlight on the hallway table outside the girls' room. Then he sat back down at the kitchen table and didn't sleep for a long time. Daniel didn't know it yet, but that nightlight in the hallway was going to matter more than he could imagine. And the closed room at the end of the hall? That story was still coming. Beverly Marsh had worked in child services for 19 years. She had seen a lot, enough to stop being surprised, enough to learn how to keep a professional distance. Not because she didn't care, but because caring too much without boundaries had nearly broken her in her first 5 years on the job. Now she was efficient, organized, realistic in a way that sometimes looked like coldness from the outside. She arrived at Daniel's house the morning after with a folder, a form, and a carefully neutral expression. Daniel made coffee. She declined. She sat at the kitchen table, the same table where he had sat alone the night before, and opened the folder. "The girls will need to be formally placed," she said. "This arrangement is temporary. 72 hours maximum while we locate next of kin. And if you don't find anyone, then they enter the placement process." She said it the way you read a bus schedule. Matter of fact. No room for interpretation. Daniel wrapped his hands around his coffee mug. "Together?" Beverly looked up from her papers for the first time. There was something in her expression. Not quite discomfort, but close. "That's harder to guarantee," she said carefully. "Emma is 8. Lily is 3. Families looking to foster tend to have preferences. Younger children are placed faster. The age gap creates a logistical—" "They're sisters," Daniel said. "I understand that." "Do you?" The words came out sharper than he intended. Beverly went still. The room got quiet in the wrong way. Daniel put his mug down and looked at the table. "I'm sorry," he said. "That wasn't fair." Beverly closed the folder slowly. She looked at him, really looked, for a long moment. "I've been doing this job for 19 years, Sergeant," she said, not unkindly. "I know what these situations cost. I also know what the process looks like. And right now, the process is the only thing protecting those girls." Daniel nodded. He didn't agree entirely, but he understood. After Beverly left, he stood in the hallway for a moment. The door to the girls' room was slightly open. He could hear Emma reading something out loud to Lily in a low, soft voice, making up the words to a picture book she clearly couldn't read yet, turning pages slowly. He stood there and listened without moving. Then his phone buzzed. "Beverly, already. A message. Home visit scheduled tomorrow. Please ensure the children are present. And Sergeant, I'd recommend not getting too attached. These cases move quickly." He set the phone face down on the counter. That afternoon, Emma was sitting at the kitchen table drawing while Lily napped, when the sound of Beverly's voice drifted in from the hallway. She had called back with a question, and Daniel had stepped out to take it. The window was cracked. The words came through clearly. "The age gap is the problem. Realistically, it's always easier to place them separately." Daniel's voice tighter. "Beverly, I'm just preparing you. And them." The call ended. Daniel came back inside and found Emma exactly where he had left her, pencil in hand, paper in front of her. But she wasn't drawing anymore. She was sitting very still, looking at nothing. He sat down across from her, said nothing for a moment. Then Emma set down her pencil, folded her hands on the table the way a much older person would, and looked at him with those steady brown eyes that had already seen too much. And she cried. Not loudly, not dramatically, just 2 slow tears that she didn't bother wiping away, as if she had decided they were allowed to fall. Daniel didn't say it's going to be okay. He didn't say, don't worry. He had spent 19 years in law enforcement learning that false comfort was its own kind of harm. He just stayed at the table, right there, present. And somehow that was exactly right. Emma had heard the truth through a cracked window, and now she carried it, the way she always carried everything, quietly and alone. It was Daniel's day off. He woke up earlier than usual, which surprised him because he hadn't slept well. He lay there for a few minutes listening to the house. It was different now, The silence had texture to it. Somewhere down the hall, someone was breathing. Two someones. He got up. He stood in the kitchen in his old robe and stared at the cookbook he had bought 3 nights ago, still on the counter where he left it. He flipped to a random page. Pancakes, 4 ingredients. A child could do it, the caption said cheerfully. He decided to try. What followed was not a cooking success story. The first batch stuck to the pan. The second batch were raw in the middle. The third batch caught the edge of the dish towel on fire. Nothing serious, just a small flame he patted out quickly. But the smoke alarm went off with an enthusiasm that seemed deeply unnecessary for 7 in the morning. That was when Lily appeared in the kitchen doorway. She stood there in her borrowed oversized t-shirt that served as a nightgown, hair pointing in 4 directions, eyes wide, and then she laughed. Full, unguarded, completely delighted laughter, the kind that lives only in very small children and takes over their whole body. Daniel froze with the dish towel in his hand. He had not heard that sound in this house. Ever. Emma appeared behind her sister a moment later, assessed the situation. The smoke, the pan, the bewildered man in the robe, and walked calmly to the counter. "Can I see the recipe?" she asked. He handed her his phone. She read it carefully, lips moving slightly, then looked at the pan, then at him. "You used the wrong burner," she said. Not unkindly, just factually. "I see that now," Daniel said, "and I think the milk is supposed to go in before the eggs. That would have been good to know earlier." Lily was still laughing. The fourth batch came out almost right, slightly uneven, a little darker on one side but genuinely edible. Emma arranged them on a plate with the focus of someone completing an important assignment. Lily sat on her knees on a kitchen chair and ate 3 of them with maple syrup she applied in an amount that was frankly alarming. For 1 hour, the kitchen had flour on the counter, sticky fingerprints on the table, and more noise than it had held in years. Daniel sat across from them and ate his imperfect pancakes, and felt something he couldn't quite name. Not happiness exactly. Something quieter than that. Something that felt like the first deep breath after a long time of breathing shallow. But later, after the dishes were washed and Lily was watching cartoons and Emma was reading in the other room, Daniel sat at the kitchen table alone and the feeling shifted. Because the reality hadn't changed. Beverly's words were still there. The timeline was still there. The fact that he was a 52-year-old single man with no experience and a complicated history was very much still there. He picked up his phone, found Beverly's number. His thumb hovered. He could say he'd reconsidered, that this wasn't realistic, that they'd be better off with a family who actually knew what they were doing. He stayed like that for a long time. Then small footsteps padded into the kitchen. Lily stopped beside his chair, reached up and patted his hand twice with her small warm palm, the way children do when they sense something without understanding it. She looked up at him with syrup on her chin. "Mister," she said. Just that. Like it was his name. Like it had always been his name. Daniel set the phone face down on the table. He didn't make that call. One small hand. One single word. And a decision that didn't get made, which was its own kind of decision. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday. It was official. Formal. The kind of envelope that doesn't apologize for what's inside. Beverly had called ahead to warn him, which he appreciated, but the warning didn't make the words on the page easier to read. 3 weeks. That was the timeline. In 3 weeks, a judge would review the case and determine permanent placement for Emma and Lily. Without a verified next of kin, and without an approved legal guardian on record, the court would proceed with separate placements based on availability. Daniel read the letter twice. Then he set it on the kitchen table and looked at it the way you look at something you wish you could unsee. Beverly came by that afternoon with more details. A family in Claremont County had already been identified as a potential placement for Lily. Approved foster parents. Good record. A home with a yard and a dog and 2 other young children. On paper, it was everything a 3-year-old could need. For Emma, nothing yet. She was older. The wait would likely be longer. "How long?" Daniel asked. Beverly looked at him steadily. "It varies," which meant she didn't want to say. Daniel stood by the window after Beverly left and watched Emma in the backyard. She had found an old tennis ball in the garage and was tossing it against the fence and catching it, alone, rhythmically, like she was working something out. He went to the table, opened his laptop, typed, "Foster care requirements, single adult Ohio." What came back was not encouraging. Background checks. He expected that. Home inspections. Fine. Training requirements. Financial assessments. Character references. And then, buried in the middle of a county FAQ page, a line that stopped him cold. Single applicants over 50 may face extended review periods depending on case circumstances. Extended review periods. 3 weeks was already almost nothing. Extended meant impossible. He closed the laptop. He sat back in his chair and stared at the ceiling and had a completely honest conversation with himself. The kind you can only have when no one is watching. He was 52 years old. He had a daughter who barely spoke to him. He had spent his entire adult life being better at his job than at anything personal. He had a closed room at the end of the hall he still hadn't opened. He was not, by any reasonable measure, the obvious answer to these girls' situation. There were people better qualified, younger, with partners, with experience. The sensible thing, the realistic thing, was to step back. Let the system do what the system does, wish them well and mean it. He had almost convinced himself. Then the back door opened and Emma came inside, tennis ball in hand, cheeks pink from the cold air. She stopped when she saw his face. She was 8 years old. But the way she read a room was something most adults never learn. She didn't ask what was wrong. She just sat down across from him at the table, set the tennis ball down carefully and folded her hands. Then she said quietly, "Do you think Lily will remember me when she grows up?" Not if they were separated. She didn't say that part. She didn't have to. The question sat in the air between them like something with weight. Daniel looked at this girl, this careful, serious, tender girl who smoothed her sister's hair in the rain and asked about a roof before she ever asked about herself, and something in his chest stopped negotiating. He reached over and put his hand briefly over her folded ones. "I'm going to look into some things," he said. Emma studied him for a moment. Then she nodded once, small and serious, and picked up her tennis ball and went back to her room. Daniel opened his laptop again. This time, he wasn't researching requirements. He was researching how to apply. The door had opened, but walking through it would cost him more than he knew, starting with a phone call to someone who had every reason not to pick up. He waited until after dinner to call her, not because he was afraid exactly, more because he wanted to get it right. He sat with his phone for a while, thinking about how to start, the way you rehearse something important before you say it out loud. He had never been good at these conversations. Patrice used to say he could walk into any difficult situation at work without flinching, but the moment something got personal, he turned into a man standing in a hallway not knowing which door to knock on. She was right. She usually was. Mara picked up on the third ring. Her voice was pleasant but careful, the tone she reserved for him. Not cold, just measured. Like she had learned to keep a little distance between herself and whatever he was about to say. "Hey, Dad. Hey, sweetheart." A pause. They both let it sit there. He told her about Emma and Lily. He kept it simple at first. The night at the store, the temporary arrangement, the timeline. He tried to be factual, professional even. It was easier that way. Mara listened without interrupting, which was something she had always been good at. When he finished, there was a long silence on the line. Then she said, "How long have they been there?" "Almost 2 weeks. Another silence. Longer this time. "Dad." Her voice had changed, still calm, but with something underneath it now. Something he recognized because he had heard it before, years ago, in a younger version of that same voice. "Are you trying to apply for guardianship?" "I'm looking into it." "You're looking into it," she repeated slowly. "Mara, you were never home." She said it without heat. That was almost worse than anger. Just a simple, accurate sentence delivered like a fact from a file. "I used to sit by the window waiting for your car. Do you know that? I did that for years. And now you want to take in 2 children you've known for 2 weeks? Daniel closed his eyes briefly. I know my history, he said. Then you know why this concerns me. It's not the same situation. How is it different? He didn't have a ready answer for that. And the silence stretched in a way that felt familiar and terrible. The specific silence of a conversation where both people are telling the truth, and it still isn't helping. I think you feel guilty, Mara said finally. Not accusing, almost gentle. And I think these girls are real, and their situation is real, and your feelings about them are real. But Dad, you can't fix what happened with us by doing this. The words landed. He sat with them for a moment. I know that, he said quietly. Do you? Mara. He stopped, started again. I'm not trying to replace anything. I'm not trying to rewrite anything. When I look at those girls, I see something that I think I can still do right. Maybe for the first time. The line was quiet for a long time. I have to go, Mara said. I'll talk to you later. She hung up, gently, which was somehow more final than if she had slammed it. Daniel sat at the table with the phone in his hand, and the house very quiet around him. He got up eventually, walked down the hall, stopped outside the girls' room where the star nightlight made a soft glow under the door. He stood there for a moment, then he went to his own room, picked up a framed photo from the dresser, him and Mara at her high school graduation, her in a blue gown, him in his uniform, both of them smiling but standing just slightly too far apart, and sat on the edge of the bed looking at it. He had not looked at this photo in months. He didn't put it away. Later, Emma appeared in his doorway, quiet as always. She looked at the photo in his hands, then at him. Is that your daughter? She asked. Yeah, he said. That's Mara. Emma tilted her head slightly, studying the image with those thoughtful eyes. She looks like someone who misses you, she said. Then she padded back down the hall without another word. Daniel looked at the photo for a long time after that. A daughter who kept her distance. A man learning to see what he had missed, and 2 girls who had no idea how much they were already changing him. The call came on a Wednesday morning. Beverly's voice was professional, measured, the way it always was when she was delivering something she knew you wouldn't want to hear. There's a preliminary visit scheduled for Friday, she said. For Lily, the family in Claremont County. It's standard procedure, just an introductory meeting. 2 hours. Caseworker will come by to pick her up. Daniel stood in the kitchen with the phone pressed to his ear and said nothing for a moment. Daniel, I heard you, he said. Friday. It doesn't mean anything is decided. It's just protocol. Right, he said. Protocol. He didn't tell Emma that day or Thursday. He told himself he was waiting for the right moment, but the truth was simpler than that. He didn't know how. Friday arrived the way difficult days always do, too quickly and with perfectly ordinary weather, as if the sky hadn't gotten the message. The caseworker, a young woman named Patricia, arrived at 10 in the morning with a kind smile and a gentle voice. She crouched down to Lily's level and spoke to her softly, telling her they were going on a little trip to meet some nice people. Lily didn't understand the full picture, but she understood enough. She turned and looked for Emma. Emma was standing in the hallway holding Lily's small backpack, the one Daniel had bought the week before, purple with a white star on the front. She had packed it herself. A change of clothes, Lily's favorite stuffed rabbit, 3 animal crackers in a little bag because Lily always wanted a snack. She held it out to Patricia without a word. Then Lily reached for her. Emmy, she said, the name she used when something felt wrong. Emma took her sister's hand and held it for a moment. She smoothed Lily's hair back from her face, that same careful gesture from the rainy night outside the store. She said something very quietly, just for Lily, that Daniel couldn't hear. Then she let go. Patricia lifted Lily gently and carried her toward the door. Lily reached back over the caseworker's shoulder, fingers open, looking at Emma with wide, uncertain eyes. Emma stood in the hallway and did not move. She held herself very still, the way she had learned to hold herself when things were happening that she couldn't stop. The door closed. The house went quiet. Daniel stood a few feet behind Emma and felt completely useless in a way that had nothing to do with being a police officer or a grown man or any of the things he had spent his life being. He didn't know what to say, so he said nothing. After a long moment, Emma turned around. Her eyes were dry. Her face was composed. But she looked at Daniel with an expression he had not seen on her before. Not the careful steadiness she usually wore, but something smaller underneath it. Something that was still, quietly, a child. "Will she know to ask for water?" Emma said. "She doesn't always ask. You have to offer it." Daniel nodded. "I'll make sure Patricia knows." Emma looked at him for another moment. Then she walked to the couch and sat down and picked up a book and opened it. And Daniel understood that she was not actually reading. She was just surviving the next 2 hours the only way she knew how. He sat down nearby. Not too close, just present. The 2 hours passed slowly. When Patricia's car finally pulled back into the driveway, Emma was at the window before Daniel even stood up. The door opened. Lily came in fast and went straight to her sister with her whole body, arms out, face buried, holding on. Emma held her back just as hard. Daniel exhaled for what felt like the first time all day. That evening, after both girls were asleep, he sat at the kitchen table in the quiet and folded his hands and looked at nothing for a long time. Then Emma's voice came from the doorway. "Mr. Harris." He turned. She stood there in the dim hallway light, small and serious. "Please," she said. "Please don't let them take her." It was the first time she had ever asked him for anything. She had never asked for anything, not once, and in that one word, "please," Daniel heard everything she had been carrying alone since that rainy night. The date came in another official envelope. 7 days. Daniel set it on the kitchen table and stood there reading it twice, the same way he had read the first one. Different words, same weight. Beverly came by that afternoon and walked him through what to expect. A family court judge, a representative from the state, documentation reviewed, placements confirmed or adjusted. The whole thing would likely take less than an hour, she said, which struck Daniel as a strange amount of time to decide the shape of 2 children's lives. "Your petition for temporary guardianship has been received," Beverly said, flipping through her folder. "It's in the file." "And?" She looked up. "And it will be considered, along with everything else." "What are the chances?" Beverly closed the folder. She had the expression of someone who had learned to be honest without being cruel. "Realistically, it's an uphill case. Single applicant. Age. No prior foster experience. The court's first priority is placing the children quickly and stably." She paused. "But the petition is there. That matters." After she left, Daniel sat with a pad of paper and tried to write down what he would say, if given the chance to speak. He filled half a page and crossed most of it out. Everything sounded either too formal or too desperate. Nothing sounded like the truth, which was simple and hard to say out loud. "I don't want these girls to lose each other." He went to the preliminary hearing 3 days later. Beverly was there. A state attorney he hadn't met before. A clerk typing quietly in the corner. The attorney spoke in the particular language of institutions. Efficient, reasonable, bloodless. He referenced case numbers and placement statistics and the concept of best interest, the way people reference weather patterns. Accurately, without feeling. Daniel sat and listened and kept his face still. Afterward, he walked out into the hallway and found Emma sitting on a wooden bench outside the waiting room, hands folded in her lap, backpack at her feet. He had arranged for a department colleague to sit with her and Lily during the hearing. Lily was asleep in the colleague's arms down the hall. Emma looked up when she saw him. "Did they decide?" she asked. "Not yet," Daniel said. "There's a bigger hearing in a few days. That's when they decide." Emma nodded slowly. She looked down at her hands for a moment. Then she said, "Okay, I'll keep waiting. I'm good at that." 7 words, delivered quietly, without self-pity, without drama. Daniel turned slightly away from her and looked at the wall and blinked several times. He composed himself, sat down beside her on the bench. They waited together for Lily to wake up. That night after dinner, Lily refused to settle. She was overtired and restless and kept climbing out of bed. Daniel tried everything Beverly's pamphlet suggested. Nothing worked. Finally, he sat on the floor of her room in the dim light of the star nightlight and did the only thing he had left. He made up a story. It came out slowly at first, uncertain, the words finding themselves as he went. A bear who lost his cave in a storm, who wandered through the cold for a long time, who found, eventually, a small clearing in a new forest. Not the same as home, but warm, but safe, but his. Lily's eyes grew heavy. Her breathing slowed. He kept going until she was fully asleep. Then he sat in the quiet for a moment and noticed Emma standing in the doorway, leaning against the frame, watching him. He hadn't heard her come in. She looked at him with an expression he was starting to recognize. Something careful and warm and a little bit wondering. Like someone reassessing something they thought they already knew. "That was a good story," she said softly. It was the first time she had ever said something like that to him. He nodded once, not trusting himself to say much back, but he felt it. In the same quiet place where a door had opened the night he found them in the rain. 7 days had become 4. 4 would become 1. And Daniel was running out of time, and excuses, to stop being afraid. He started writing at 11 o'clock at night, not on his laptop. By hand, on plain paper, at the kitchen table with a single lamp on, and the rest of the house dark and quiet. He had tried typing it earlier, and it came out sounding like a report. He didn't want to write a report. He wanted to write the truth. So he picked up a pen. He crossed things out, started sentences over, got up twice to get water he didn't drink, sat back down. He wrote about the night at Crawford's, about Emma's question in the rain, about Lily's laugh when he burned the pancakes, about the 2 hours on a Friday morning when a small backpack sat by the front door, and the house felt wrong, in a way he couldn't explain except that it was missing someone who had only been there 2 weeks, and already fit like she'd always been there. He wrote about his own failures. He didn't soften them. He had been an absent father. He had chosen the job over the people. He had a daughter 2 towns over who called on birthdays, and that distance was his doing, not hers. He wrote, "I am not the obvious choice, I understand that, but I am the present one, and I have learned, later than I should have, that being present is not a small thing. It might be the whole thing." He wrote about the closed room at the end of the hall, how he had kept it shut for 3 years, how the week before, without planning to, he had opened it, cleaned it out, put in 2 small beds he ordered online, and assembled badly, and had to take apart and reassemble with Emma reading the instructions to him out loud on a Saturday afternoon. He didn't write that part to impress anyone. He wrote it because it was true. He finished just before 1 in the morning. 4 pages, uneven handwriting, 1 coffee stain on the corner of the 3rd page, not polished, not legal, just honest. He read it once through. Didn't change anything. The morning he drove to the courthouse before his shift and handed it to the clerk personally, asked her to make sure it was added to the file for the Harris petition. She looked at the handwritten pages with a slightly surprised expression. "It's a formal submission," he said. She nodded and took it. He drove to work, did his shift, came home, and found Mara sitting on the front porch steps. She was in jeans and a gray jacket, hands around a coffee cup she must have brought herself, because he certainly didn't have good coffee in that house. She looked up when his car pulled in. He got out slowly, walked to the porch, stood there. Neither of them said anything for a moment. He had not seen her in 4 months. She looked like herself. Like Patrice around the eyes, like him in the jaw, like her own person everywhere else. She looked tired in the way people look tired when they've been thinking hard about something. He sat down on the step beside her. The evening was cool. A neighbor's dog barked twice down the street and then went quiet. "I drove past 3 times, Mara said finally. "Before I stopped. I wondered why you were just sitting there." "I was deciding." He nodded. He understood that. He'd been deciding things himself lately. They sat in silence for another minute. It was not the terrible silence of their phone call. It was something different, something that had space in it. Inside the house, faint and muffled, came the sound of Lily laughing at something on television. Then Emma's voice, gentle and amused, saying something back. Mara turned her head slightly toward the sound. She didn't say anything, but she didn't leave either. And when Daniel stood up and opened the front door, she stood up too. She had driven past 3 times. She had spent 31 years learning how to keep her distance from him, and something in the sound of 2 little girls in his living room had made her stop the car. She didn't say much when she walked in. She just looked. The kitchen counter had a crayon drawing taped to the cabinet. A purple house with 4 stick figures out front, 2 tall and 2 small, all holding hands. Lily had drawn it 3 days ago and presented it to Daniel with the seriousness of an artist unveiling a masterpiece. He had taped it up without thinking twice. Mara stood in front of it for a moment. She moved to the refrigerator. More drawings. A lopsided sun. A dog they didn't have. Emma's careful handwriting on one. Our house. Our house. Mara touched the edge of that one lightly, just with her fingertips. She walked down the hallway. The star nightlight was on even though it was still evening. Lily had decided it should stay on always, and Daniel had stopped arguing about it. Mara noticed it, didn't comment. She looked through the open door of the girls' room. 2 small beds, mismatched but deliberate. A stuffed rabbit on Lily's pillow. A library book on Emma's nightstand with a bookmark halfway through. She stood there quietly. Then she turned and looked at her father. "You put a nightlight in the hallway," she said. Lily was scared of the dark. Mara nodded slowly. She looked at the little glowing star for a moment. "You never put one in my room," she said. Her voice was not angry. It was something more complicated than angry. Something that had been stored carefully for a very long time and was only now being set down. Daniel looked at his daughter. "I know," he said. "I'm sorry, Mara. I'm sorry I didn't." The hallway was very quiet. Mara pressed her lips together. Looked at the ceiling briefly the way people do when they're deciding whether to cry. She didn't cry. She exhaled. Slowly. Like something releasing. "I'm staying for dinner," she said. He nodded. "I'll figure out what we have. I'll help." They walked back to the kitchen together. Lily was still on the couch watching cartoons. When she saw Mara, she stared with the open curiosity of a 3-year-old who has not yet learned to pretend otherwise. "Who are you?" Lily asked. Mara looked at Daniel briefly, then back at Lily. "I'm Mara," she said. Lily considered this seriously. Then she patted the cushion beside her. "You can sit here," she said. "It's a good spot." Mara sat down. Emma came in from the other room, took in the scene without surprise, and quietly set a 4th place at the dinner table. Nobody asked her to. She just did it. 4 places at a table that had held one for 11 years. A nightlight in a hallway. A daughter sitting down in a spot a 3-year-old chose for her. 2 days before the hearing, Beverly called. Daniel was in the kitchen helping Emma with a school worksheet when his phone rang. He looked at the screen, told Emma he'd be right back, and stepped into the hallway. Beverly's voice was careful, measured in a way that meant she was choosing her words. "We found Carla," she said. Daniel went still. "She's alive," Beverly continued quickly. "She's stable. She's been at a care facility about 40 miles from here. She was admitted several days ago, and we were only just notified through the system." Daniel leaned against the hallway wall. "Does she know about the hearing?" he asked. "She's been informed. She's not in a condition to attend, but her presence in the system changes things legally." Beverly paused. "The state attorney may argue that placement decisions should be deferred pending her recovery, which could mean the hearing gets complicated or delayed." "How delayed?" "Months, possibly. It depends on the judge." Daniel closed his eyes briefly. "There's something else," Beverly said. "When they told her about the girls, about where they were, she was confused at first, overwhelmed. She couldn't respond right away." A pause. "She's not a bad person, Daniel. She's a person who got lost." He knew that. He had known it since he read the file. "Okay," he said quietly. "Thank you for telling me." He stood in the hallway for a moment after the call ended. Through the wall, he could hear Emma's pencil moving on paper, the small, ordinary sound of a child doing homework. He went back to the kitchen. Emma looked up. She read his face the way she always did, quickly, thoroughly, without asking. She didn't ask now either. She just reached across the table and rested her hand on his briefly, the way he had done for her weeks ago at this same table. Then she went back to her worksheet. Daniel sat down, looked at the wall, thought about a woman 40 miles away in a care facility who had loved her daughters and gotten lost and was now trying to find her way back. Thought about a hearing in 2 days that suddenly had more variables than before. Thought about Mara, who had called that morning just to ask how things were going. No occasion, just asking. The house was quiet, but it wasn't empty anymore. And that, he realized, was the difference between the quiet of before and the quiet of now. Before, the silence had nothing in it. Now, it had everything. Carla was alive. The hearing was still coming. And somewhere in a care facility 40 miles away, a mother was beginning the long road back. Daniel didn't expect it. He had filed his paperwork. He had written his letter. He had done everything within his reach and made his peace with the fact that some things were simply outside it. The hearing was tomorrow. Whatever happened would happen. He was in the backyard with Lily, watching her try to catch a butterfly she had absolutely no chance of catching, when his phone rang. Beverly. "I need to tell you something," she said. "Professionally, I probably shouldn't be calling, but I'm going to anyway." He waited. "I submitted a supplemental report to the court this morning, independent of the standard case file, a clinical recommendation." She spoke carefully, precisely, the way she always did. "I argued that given the developmental stage of both children, continuity of attachment should be weighted as a primary factor in placement decisions. That separating bonded siblings during an active period of adjustment creates measurable harm, and that the current placement has demonstrated stability, consistency, and emotional attunement beyond what the initial assessment projected." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "Beverly," he said. "I'm not finished." A brief pause. "I also noted that the temporary guardian has shown a pattern of prioritizing the children's needs above personal convenience, which in 19 years of casework I have found to be a more reliable indicator than age, marital status, or prior experience." The butterfly landed on a flower 2 feet from Lily. She froze, held her breath. "That's a risk for you," Daniel said quietly. "Professionally." "Yes," Beverly said simply. "It is." "Why?" A short silence. "Because I've been doing this job for 19 years, she said. "And I know the difference between a case and a child." Another pause. "Don't thank me. Just don't mess it up." She hung up. Daniel stood in the backyard with the phone at his side. The butterfly lifted off. Lily watched it go with enormous, patient eyes, then turned to Daniel with a look of pure, philosophical acceptance. He laughed. Quietly, genuinely, the kind of laugh that comes from somewhere real. He went inside and stopped in the kitchen doorway. Mara was at the table. She had come by that afternoon without much announcement, the way she had started doing. Emma was across from her, cards spread between them, deeply focused. Mara was teaching her gin rummy. Emma was winning. And on the couch, curled against a throw pillow, Lily was asleep, in Mara's jacket, which Lily had apparently claimed without asking, and Mara had apparently allowed without hesitation. Daniel stood in the doorway and did not go in immediately. He just looked at the room, at the cards on the table and the sleeping child and his daughter's face, relaxed and present in a way he hadn't seen in years. He thought about Beverly's report, about the hearing tomorrow, about Carla 40 miles away beginning something hard and necessary, about a house that had been empty for 11 years and wasn't anymore. He stood there a moment longer. Then he walked in. Tomorrow was the hearing. Everything had been said that could be said. Every door that could be opened had been opened. The hearing was at 9 in the morning. Daniel wore his civilian clothes. He had considered the uniform and decided against it. He wasn't there as a sergeant. He was there as himself, which felt more exposed and also more right. Beverly was already seated when he arrived. She gave him a small nod. Nothing more. The state attorney, a composed man named Gerald Foss, arranged his papers with practiced efficiency. He had kind eyes and an impersonal manner, the combination that courtrooms seem to produce in people after enough years. The judge was a woman in her 60s named Honorable Patricia Wynne. She had white hair and reading glasses she kept taking off and putting back on. She read through the file without hurrying. The room was very quiet. Emma was in a small waiting room down the hall with a department colleague Daniel trusted. Lily was with Mara, who had come without being asked, who had simply appeared at the house at 7:30 that morning with 2 cups of coffee and said, "I'll stay with them." He had not found words for that yet. Gerald Foss presented the state's position methodically: placement options, timelines, Carla's current status, and the legal implications of her recovery process. He was thorough and fair and entirely bloodless about it, the way the law sometimes has to be. Beverly presented her supplemental report. She spoke without notes, clearly, clinically, and with a quiet conviction underneath the professional language that anyone paying attention could hear. Then Judge Wynne looked at Daniel. "You'd like to address the court?" He stood. He had notes in his pocket. He didn't take them out. He said that he was not a perfect candidate, that he knew his record as a father had gaps in it that he couldn't close by wishing, that he was 52 years old and had more empty years behind him than he was proud of. He said that Emma packed her sister's backpack the night before a 2-hour visit with every item Lily might need, including 3 animal crackers in a small bag because Lily always wanted a snack, and that no system, however well designed, had taught her to do that. He said, "They've already lost enough." The room was quiet. Judge Wynne looked at him for a long moment over her reading glasses. Then she set the glasses down entirely. "Sergeant Harris." Her voice was measured, careful. "Are you prepared to lose your privacy, your routines, and any remaining vision of a quiet retirement for this?" The question sat in the air. Daniel did not answer immediately. He thought about the burned pancakes and the star nightlight and the handwritten letter and the closed room that wasn't closed anymore. He thought about Mara sitting on the porch steps and Lily asleep in her jacket. He thought about a rainy night outside a corner store and 2 brown eyes measuring him. "Yes," he said. Judge Wynne studied him a moment longer. Then she made a note. "I'd like to speak with the older child," she said. Emma was brought in. She sat in the chair across from the judge with her hands folded, and her back straight and her face composed in that way of hers that was never quite childlike and never quite adult, but something quietly in between. Judge Wynne leaned forward slightly. "Emma, can you tell me what you want?" Emma thought about it, genuinely considered it, the way she did everything. Then she said, "I want Lily to know where she lives." Judge Wynne looked at her for a long moment. Then she closed the folder. The guardianship was granted. Judge Wynne announced it quietly, without ceremony, the way real things tend to happen. Temporary guardianship, joint placement, effective immediately pending formal review in 90 days. Not adoption, not a guarantee, not a fairy tale ending with a bow on top. Just a beginning. Daniel stood in the hallway outside the courtroom afterward and felt the specific exhaustion of someone who has been holding their breath for 3 weeks and has finally, carefully, been allowed to exhale. Beverly came out a few minutes later. She stopped beside him, said nothing for a moment. 90 days, she said finally. "I know. The review will be thorough. I know that too." She looked at him with those 19 years of everything eyes. "You should also know," she said, "that Carla has formally entered a structured recovery program. Voluntary. She asked about the girls yesterday." A pause. She asked if they were sleeping inside. Daniel looked at her. The same words. From the mother. From the daughter. The same question carried in different hands across the same rainy distance. "What did you tell her?" he asked. "I told her yes," Beverly said. "I told her they were." She nodded once, picked up her folder, and walked down the hallway without looking back. Daniel stood there for another moment. Then he went to find his people. Mara was in the parking lot with both girls. Lily was sitting on the hood of the car, which she was absolutely not supposed to be doing, eating a granola bar Mara had produced from somewhere. Emma was standing beside Mara with her arms crossed, and her face doing that thing where she was trying not to smile and failing slightly. When Daniel came through the door, Lily saw him first. She threw her arms up. "Mister." He crossed the parking lot and picked her up, something he hadn't done in the early days because he hadn't known if it was okay, hadn't known the rules, hadn't known anything. He knew better now. He knew that Lily needed to be held the same way she needed to be fed and kept warm. It wasn't optional. It was just care. She wrapped her arms around his neck and he held her, and looked at Emma over her shoulder. Emma looked back at him. Her arms were still crossed. Her face was still doing that thing. "Well," she said. "We're going home," he said. She uncrossed her arms. That was all. The weeks that followed were not simple. There were follow-up visits from Beverly and her colleagues. There were forms and appointments, and a family therapist named Dr. Okafor, who was patient and warm, and asked questions that made everyone uncomfortable in productive ways. There were nights when Lily had bad dreams and nights when Emma was so quiet, Daniel sat outside her door just to be nearby. There were mornings when the whole thing felt enormous, and he wondered privately if Judge Wynn had made a terrible mistake. He made his own mistakes too. He raised his voice once over something small and immediately felt awful and apologized, and Emma said it's okay. Everyone gets frustrated with such calm maturity that it broke his heart a little. He forgot a school event and made it up with a very mediocre homemade cake that everyone pretended was better than it was. He scheduled a dentist appointment on the wrong day and had to rearrange his entire week. He learned. Slowly. Imperfectly. The way real things are learned. Mara came every Sunday. It started because she said she wanted to help, which was true. It continued because the table felt right with 4 people at it, which she didn't say but which Daniel understood. She and Emma had finished the gin rummy phase and moved on to chess, which Emma was learning with terrifying focus. She and Lily had a running game involving couch cushions that Daniel had never fully understood the rules of, but that produced a great deal of noise and laughter every week. One Sunday, washing dishes side by side after dinner, Mara said, "She talks about you, you know, Emma, when you're not in the room." "What does she say?" Mara smiled. "Kept washing. Good things," she said. "Quiet good things, the best kind." Daniel dried the dish in his hand and didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Carla sent a card in the 6th week. It came through Beverly, through the proper channels, reviewed and approved. It was a plain card with flowers on the front. Inside, in careful handwriting, Emma and Lily. "I think about you every day. I am working hard. I love you. Mom." Daniel sat with that card for a long time before he knew how to give it to them. He gave it to Emma privately first. Let her read it. Watched her face, she read it twice, folded it carefully, put it in the small wooden box on her nightstand where she kept important things. "Is she getting better?" Emma asked. "She's working on it," Daniel said. "Every day." Emma nodded, looked at the box. "Good," she said. Simply, without drama, the way she said most true things. On a Saturday morning in early spring, Daniel found a packet of wildflower seeds in the garage, left by the previous owners, probably, forgotten for years in a dusty corner. He brought them outside without a plan. Emma appeared beside him the way she did, quietly and without announcement. She looked at the seeds, at the empty patch of dirt along the fence. "Are we planting those?" she asked. "Thought we might," he said. They worked together without much talking. Emma read the instructions on the back of the packet with her usual thoroughness. Lily came out eventually, and helped by patting the dirt in places that didn't strictly need patting, but that she felt strongly about. When the last seed was in the ground, Emma sat back on her heels and looked at the fence line, bare and brown and not yet anything. "Do flowers come back every year?" she asked. Daniel looked at the ground, at the small hands that had helped him plant something in dirt that had been empty for a long time. "If someone keeps watering them," he said. "Yes." Emma considered this seriously. Then she nodded, like it was a rule she intended to follow. The case would return to court in 90 days. Carla was still recovering. The road ahead was long and uncertain and would require more patience than any of them fully had yet. But the seeds were in the ground, and the people who planted them were home. Thank you for staying with this story until the very end. If it moved you, if it reminded you of someone you love or something you believe in, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Because some stories don't just end, they keep growing. If someone keeps watering them,